swallow in the icy mist. Shadows swallow, we can't resist. Recording the silent with every breath. In the heart of mystery, we dance with death. Bones and ashes scattered untold. Secrets in the darkness, tight they hold. Chris and the team seeking the roar. In the realm where the living touch the old.
Hello Dark Horses, I hope you like our new introduction. This was put together for us by GT Records UK, a new independent record label based within the northwest area of the United Kingdom. So a great big thank you to them. It will also be available on all apps to stream and purchase soon. Now let's get into the episode. I bring to you Vampires of the Road. Any lone driver knows only too well how the roads and the highways seem so different during the hours of darkness. The driver's mind after dark becomes more susceptible to tiredness, and then there's the imagination, which is a driver's worst enemy at night. Some drivers combat this fear by turning on the car radio or CD. The passing landscapes of the road, bathed in the light of the roadside lamps, become quite eerie. The shadow of an oak tree may be perceived as an outline of something supernatural, but sometimes it isn't all in your mind. There are paranormal entities that haunt the roadsides in Britain, and a few of these are supposed and allegedly may be vampires. Let me take you to Union Street in Bedford. This street runs close to the town's Catherine prison, and at the point where the street meets Travistock Street and Chapman Road, you'll find a roundabout now exists. But did you know that beneath this roundabout lies a staked corpse? This corpse is the mortal remains of a said vampiric highwayman named Black Tom. He was hanged for highway robbery in 1607. Strange rumours surround this bandit, who earned his nickname because of his swarthy, almost yellowish green skin and the coal black hair. Some say that he's a vampire, while others believed he'd sold his soul to the devil. The authorities were warned by the superstitious people of Bedford that Black Tom would rise from his grave if he wasn't staked. And so, after his body was removed to the gallows, and before a huge mob, a man approached with a large hammer and a sharpened wooden stake. 4 inches in diameter and almost 2 feet in length. He tore open the dead man's shirt, exposing his breast, then pushed a pointed stake into the corpse's breastbone. Another volunteer held the stake in place, and the man brought down the hammer hard 7 times. Blood issued from the mouth, the nose, and the anus of the corpse, and wind was expelled from the stomach, and intestines showered several onlookers with blood and mucus. The corpse began to shudder with post-death nerves, and it was turned over so Black Tom faced hell when he was lowered into his deep grave. People spat down the hole as the grave diggers tried to fill it, and that should have been the end of the demonic highwayman. But some say this was only the beginning. Black Tom apparently outlived everyone who had stood at his graveside, and somehow the highwayman, who had been rumoured to thirst for blood, emerged from his grave and was seen by many of the terrified people of the town, dressed in a long black cape, with his head lolling about as he walked. Some of the locals say this is probably because the hangman's nut has broken his neck. Let me take you to a cold evening in 1608. Black Tom, now known as a vampire, is said to have jumped onto the back of a horse, being ridden across a common by a well-to-do lady named Susanna Higgins, who was subjected to a violent attack. Her firm breasts, neck and thighs were bitten deeply. However, Miss Higgins was happened to be saved by a passing gentleman named John Gibbons, who was passing in a stagecoach at the time of assault. Mr. Gibbons gave chase, but the caped assailant vanished into the dust. The vampire attacks of Black Tom apparently went on for over 2 centuries, and at one point 7 priests and a gang of local men and even women attempted to ambush the bloodthirsty highwayman so they could impale him and burn him. However, this never worked, as Black Tom managed to run off into the night at superhuman speed. Black Tom was seen up until the 1960s, according to the legend of Bedfordshire. It was in 1963 a motorist from St. Albans named George Johnson apparently ran into the vampire creature and knocked him down. The old legend of the story states this happened during severe winter of 1963, when Mr. Johnson was driving along Bedford's Tavistock Street towards the house of his brother-in-law on Clapham Road. The incident happened just after 10 p.m. and there was a sudden heavy snowfall. The road ahead was deserted and the windscreen of Mr. Johnson's Ford Anglia became coated with large snowflakes. The windscreen wipers were switched on, and moments later the fuzzy outline of a pedestrian came out of nowhere and hurried into the path of the oncoming vehicle. Mr. Johnson braked hard as he could, but hit the person square on. The pedestrian rolled across the bonnet of the car, up and over the windscreen, and then onto the roof. Mr. Johnson was in shock when he saw the person slide down the rear window and onto the road. Still in shock, Mr. Johnson got out of his car and proceeded towards the back of the Ford Anglia. There lay the lifeless man in a long cloak, lay crumpled on a thin layer of snow on the macadam. Mr. Johnson noticed the face of the strangely dressed man was heavily wrinkled, and his hands looked well shivered. As George stood down beside the man to check if he was still alive, the old stranger on the floor opened his eyes, which were startlingly bloodshot with a pitch-black irises. The ghostly-looking eyes swiveled to survey Johnson. Then the odd-looking man got onto his feet and quickly ran off into the snowy light. Mr. Johnson then continued to drive and finally reached the home of his brother-in-law Bob. As he mentioned the bizarre, hard-stopping collision with the electric, red-eyed pedestrian. Bob, however, wasn't surprised. Bob went on to tell his brother-in-law that the same man had been seen in the area many times over the past years and was supposed to be the vampire highwayman known as Black Tom. George Johnson thought about the intense unnatural redness of the old man's eyes and the apparent advanced age of his heavily wrinkled face and shuddered. In the late 1960s, two amateur ghost hunters investigated the alleged sightings of the resurrected 17th century highwayman and came to the conclusion that the vampire had a lair in a wooded area close to the A6 motorway. A vampire hunt was planned, but the authorities got wind of the publicity stunt and cautioned the ghost hunters. If this was today's time, then some would say these amateur ghost hunters would be the likes of Sam and Kobe, or Jade and Mandy. Perhaps Black Tom is now resting at peace at last, as he hasn't been seen or heard of since 1969. Or is he just hibernating? The following strange story was given to Mr. Tom Selman in September 2001 by a Liverpool comedian, whom Tom Selman refuses to identify. The comedian told Mr. Selman that it would only relate the full facts of the bizarre and scary tale if Mr. Selman would give him his word that it would never identify him. Throughout this following strange story, we shall therefore have to call the comedian Ted. It was early 1990s when a popular Liverpool comedian named Ted drove up the M62 to Manchester, where he was due to perform a comedy routine as part of a cabaret show. As usual, Ted's performance was warmly received by the audience, and he decided to go back on stage for another 20 minutes. While Ted performed his additional material, he noticed a beautiful-looking woman of about 25 to 30 years of age sitting at a table. The lady kept smiling at Ted, and she reminded the comedian of a film actress named Freya Mayujas, who had enjoyed some popularity in the 1970s. After the comedy act, Ted went backstage and changed. Then the manager of the club escorted him to a specifically reserved table for a meal and a drink. Just before the next performer took to the stage, Ted went over to the table where the woman was sitting alone and offered her to join him. The woman smiled and accepted. The lady was very tall and looked even more attractive at closer quarters. She had sapphire blue eyes and long blonde hair. Speaking in a very soft voice, she said, "My name's Danielle. Her accent was not a local one. Ted ordered champagne and was soon chatting Danielle up. The woman, however, preferred to sip mineral water. There was a stay behind at the club, and it wasn't long before Ted and Danielle were dancing slowly as they embraced each other within the dance floor. Ted had learned from Danielle that her boyfriend had arranged to meet her at the club, but hadn't turned up for any reason. Danielle had said that she lived in St. Helens, on the outskirts of Liverpool, and Ted said, as she had not been drinking, that she could drive him home to Liverpool in his car. Danielle had said that Ted should stay overnight at her house until he was fit enough to drive in the morning. At 3 a.m, Ted and Danielle left the club in Manchester and walked through the chilly night air towards the car park. Danielle shivered in her sleeveless top, so Ted gave her his jacket. Minutes later, the couple embarked on the return journey down the M62. Danielle had to strap Ted's seatbelt on him because he was so intoxicated. During the journey, Ted reached for the controls of the car radio as he wanted to hear some music to pierce the deadly silence inside the vehicle. But Danielle's hand intercepted his, and so the couple sat in silence as the car sped along the motorway. Ted suddenly turned to look at Danielle, and he saw something that still gives him nightmares to this day. The girl's features changed into what can only be described as a demonic face. She turned to him, and her eyes turned blood red, and her mouth opened wide, twice as wide as a normal mouth, to reveal an array of long, pointed teeth. The comedian was suddenly sober. He felt faint and breathless with the shock. The girl driving the car was some sort of supernatural entity, resembling a vampiress. The thing in his driver's seat screamed with laughter and subtly zigzagged between the lanes of the motorway. Ted was definitely not a religious man, but he suddenly said, "Jesus, please save me." The car suddenly screeched into the 180-degree turn, slid off the hard shoulder onto a slip road where the vehicle veered into a ditch. Ted opened the door and tried to get out, but in blind panic he forgot to unclick his seatbelt. He shouted for help and looked at the seat beside him. It was empty, except for his leather jacket. There was no trace of the demonic figure that he had been discarding as a woman. The police found Ted wandering along the hard shoulder of the M62, and that he related his bizarre tale, but wasn't believed. The police checked the club, and the management confirmed that Ted left with a woman, and that she had driven home. Not one person in the club knew who Danielle was, and she was never seen in the club again. Ted was badly shaken by the spine-chilling incident and has never appeared at the Manchester club since. Every so often, Ted relives the horror of this vampiric woman in his dreams, and on more than one occasion has woken up in a cold sweat. He has no idea why the entity chose him, and wonders what a fate he would have met if he had not called upon Jesus to save him. This case is a real puzzler. Will Danielle perform her devilish transvision trick on some other suspecting male one day? Only time will tell. We would like to hear from you about any of your strange sightings with any ghostly figures that appear to come out of nowhere on the road. Feel free to use our community forum on our YouTube. Until next time, sleep tight.